Hello, everyone here, thank you. Nigel Kirby, Deputy Director, National Crime Agency. I have to say I'm really nervous about today. When I woke up early this morning, it wasn't so much about what I was going to say to you, it was realising I'm the warm-up act for Sir Lenny Henry. And I know that it will be a lot less of you here should Sir Lenny not be after me. So I'll try to keep you entertained for the next 30 minutes or so and talk about the role of the National Crime Agency in tackling serious organised crime in particular, what the threat is from serious organised crime, in particular in the economic crime space, and some of what we're doing about it, our response. Clearly, in the time got, it will just be a snapshot. Out of interest, how many people have heard of the National Crime Agency before today? Oh, that's good and encouraging. How many think you know what we do? That's good. We've got a film at the end for you. Okay, so what we do. We were set up in 2013 by the now Prime Minister, Home Secretary Theresa May, at a particular time, under the Crime and Courts Act. We've got a very simple mission, really, to lead the fight to cut serious and organised crime. We're responsible for ensuring that there's an efficient and an effective response to serious and organised crime. Responsible for ensuring there's a response, it doesn't mean we do it all. There are 4,500 of us in the UK, of which about 150 of those are abroad, so 4,500, 150 abroad in 50 countries. I'll come back to that. We couldn't possibly do it all ourselves. So 3 things for us, really. It's about leading, it's about supporting, and it's about coordinating. So there are things that we will lead and operations that we will lead, where it's high risk and high threat and only we can do it. A lot of the area we're in the support, where we're working with partners, partner agencies, and not just traditional law enforcement and other things, but with industry. And coordinating. And I'll talk a little bit about how we coordinated some work around pension liberation fraud in a minute to give an example. I'll come back to that. But that's effectively our role. 3 things for us in setting this out. We are an intelligence-led agency. It is our responsibility to ensure that the threat from serious organised crime, and in my particular area, the threat from economic crime, is understood. Understood by looking at open source. That's easy, isn't it? Other end of the spectrum, working with the security intelligence agencies like GCHQ, using some of our covert techniques and other ways to find out what bad people are doing to us. When we understand that threat, it's about the response. The National Crime Agency will lead that response at the highest end of threat and risk, whether others are maybe unable to do it because of national boundaries or because of international boundaries, again, quite often with partners. High end, high risk. That's where we operate. And finally, from things, it's about providing national capabilities to partners. So what do I mean by these specialist national capabilities? Things that we should, as a country, because it's value for money, only do once, but provide for others. Things such as interception, things such as covert intelligence gathering, eavesdropping, these sensitive things. I'll probably find out I haven't got a job now if it goes on YouTube. We're clear and open about these things. Civil recovery and tax of people who we can't convict, but they've got lots of money. Our international network, 150 people in 50 countries around the globe, leveraging partner stuff. They are the national capabilities that we use and make available. They're the 3 things. We lead, support, coordinate, intelligence-led, highest risk, threat, harm, and national capabilities. That's the agency, and there's something at the end that will give you a little bit more that hopefully you can take home and as a reminder. I'm responsible, the deputy responsible for the Economic Crime Command in the NCA. Economic crime, international bribery, corruption, fraud, public fraud, private fraud, money laundering, high money laundering in particular, that involving professional enablers. And I'm not going to sit and give my whole business, business plan for the Economic Crime Agency. There are 2 things within that, though, that are really important and really relevant today and delivering our job. The first is an enduring, relentless focus on corrupt professional enablers. What I mean by this are the very few corrupt people in your industry, in banking, in lawyers, accountancy firms, that turn a blind eye or are actively complicit. Be very, very clear about this. There are a few. There's not many of the things, but they compound the problem and they let us all down. So an active focus on this is really important for us as an agency. The other side is partnerships. So we've got P, professional enablers, P, partnership. 2.5 years ago, when Donald, my boss, and I got together, we said, we are going to change the dynamic that we have, particularly with the banking industry, but financial services, starting on banks, because it's not right that we turn around and say, it's all the bank's fault. It's not right that the banks turn around and say, law enforcement aren't doing enough. It's a shared problem, and a shared response is needed. So we've had a focus on ensuring that we have a real meaningful partnership with the banks and the financial services, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So that starts covering the role that we have at the moment. Let me tell you a little bit about the threat. Some staggering figures here. Staggering figures. Annual fraud indicator. UK, the cost to the UK of fraud, £193 billion. 193 billion? 144 of that, large, small, medium enterprises, business. Taxpayer, 37 billion. 37 billion. Taxpayer. That builds a lot of hospitals, a lot of schools. It might even fill a little bit of the national debt. 10 million, you and me, individuals, public. Sorry, billion. I'm getting the B's. And the, action fraud, City of London action fraud, where I'm sure some of you have reported frauds into, or maybe some of you are unfortunate customers, reported 11 billion of actual fraud reported into actual fraud last year. Staggering figures. Money laundering, 2013, the EU reckoned that there was 3.6% of world GDP. That's about 2.1 trillion of criminal money in the global system. The UN reckoned that about 1.6 trillion was money being laundered throughout the global system. It was 1.6 trillion. Big numbers. The NCA said, our assessment is hundreds of billions of US dollars are laundered through UK banks and their subsidiaries every year. That was deeply unpopular. I spent 48 hours up having to brief people and deal with that, because why on earth are we saying that? We're not beating the banks up. We're not blaming them. They are the victims of some of this. It's going through their systems. They don't see it. They might not be able to spot it at times. But that's the kind of figure. That's our job, to tell government, tell the public, actually what the threat is in this particular arena. So why is this important? It happens to be UK, particularly London, but not just London, there are other cities now, such as Liverpool. World-class financial services, world-class accountancy, world-class legal services. It's really important for credibility of the UK that we tackle some of this. And when I say about the UK, it's easy for us to point the finger, isn't it? I have seen and heard people pointing the finger at maybe an African state, take for example. Look at the money, look at the billions your corrupt ex-politicians have embezzled out of your countries. Look at it, it's dreadful. Yeah. And it's come through the UK financial system? And it's invested in our property? Who are we? Who are we to point the finger and say, it's all your fault? We need to own that problem. I think that in the UK, we've had a giant step forward in this. The National Risk Assessment, which was published in October 2015 by the government, starts setting these things out and saying, this is the threat that we face, and these are the vulnerabilities we have as a UK, and this is what we're doing about it. I think, you may disagree on other things, that that's a really important step to be able to take. Because it's easy, isn't it, for us to sit there and say, law, it's not happening in my business. Law, there's no corruption in law enforcement. It's short, it doesn't solve the problem. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's important, and working particularly with the banking sector at the moment, because that's where we started, because that's where most of this is recognised. We've got a really, really positive relationship, and I'll come into that one, with them, that recognise that these challenges are working with us to tackle them, and we're having some spectacular results in that space. When I talk about professional enablers as well, it's not just about banking. Let me talk about trust and service company providers. I'm sure many of you know lots more about them than I do. They're professional enablers. There was a story in the newspaper, I know a bit more about it because we spoke with the Moldovan authorities about this as well, but it was called the Moldovan Laundrette. About $1 billion stolen from Moldova out of Moldovan banks, laundered via Latvia. So what? What's the UK got to do with that? Fortunately, only about 2 million of that went through UK financial services, which isn't a great deal in the numbers we're talking about. All of it went through 20 UK shell companies set up by 1 or 2 TCSPs. I'm really interested in those TCSPs. I'm really interested in those that are facilitating serious and organised crime, and they are the attention of national law enforcement. So let me talk a bit, that's the threat. Let me talk a little bit about the response that we have at the moment around this. It's important to tackle. I believe tackling economic crime protects the public, your customers, it protects the business, your businesses, it protects the UK economy, and it protects the UK reputation. Stand by this, I firmly believe in that. The way we do it in the UK is a government strategy, a government framework, 4 Ps. Pursue, prevent, protect, prepare. Pursue kind of says what it does on the tin. It's about going after the really bad people that are doing this stuff and putting them in prison and taking their money off them. That's primarily what my agency does, along with others. Prevent and protect. Prevent people getting into it in the first place. Protect your systems. That's what you do. That's what we need to and are informing you and others together about how to prevent things in the first place, how to protect yourselves against crime. Really, really important. I've made a career, nearly 30 years, in law enforcement of where, we find bad people that are doing bad things to our citizens, and we put them in prison. That's what we do. I wouldn't mind being out of a job. Well, I haven't got a very good pension, I don't think, now, so maybe I won't. I'd prefer to prevent it in the first place. I really genuinely would prefer that this didn't happen, that there weren't victims, because some of the victims, and you see their stories, are dreadful. But it's not going to happen. So we've got pursue, that's what we're there for. Prepare is very much a case of what are you going to do when it happens, in terms of when you have your data loss or you are hacked, what is it that you do? And the government in this space, I'll do a little bit of strategic stuff at the moment. There's quite a lot going on at the moment in my world for this. So the UK government's brought in something called beneficial ownership. You'll be well aware of that, many of you here, where controlling persons of companies have to register in the UK since April 2016. It's pressed and lobbied a lot with the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies. Lots of companies set up there, aren't there? Very opaque. But law enforcement will have access, almost direct access, almost, or certainly within 24 hours, of all the information held in overseas territories and Crown dependencies to enable us to do our job for those that choose to use those territories to set up company structures to launder money. And the pledge as well, that hasn't come through at the moment, but for foreign companies that purchase property or look for public contracts in the UK to be registered. So there's some really big things that I think from a transparency agenda will make a difference to the way we tackle things. The criminal finances bill is going through Parliament at the moment. My team have been working really hard on that with Home Office in relation to powers. Another P, isn't it? There are some things we need. But there's one P missing from all of that for me. It's not in there. You know what it is, don't you? It's not pursue, it's prevent, there's protect, there's prepare. It's partnership. The only way we're going to tackle economic crime in this way is in partnership. So, if they were strategy, if they wrote the strategy again, I'd ask them to put another P in there. But that's what we do and how we do it. Let me talk then a little bit about partnership here. I was told or asked not to speak about pensions. You said apparently you've got 2.5 days of pensions and pensions fraud, and you don't need a non-expert in pensions fraud to stand up here and speak to you about it. And when I looked at the acronyms used, we're great in law enforcement. We have 3-letter acronyms because 3 is about as much as we can do at once, like NCA and MI5, whatever it might be. You've got 4 or 5-letter acronyms, haven't you? SIPs and CROPS and MOPS and SROPS and all these things that I tried to remember, but the pressure of being Seleni's warm-up act made me forget them all. So I've forgotten those, but what's important is pension liberation fraud. Started in 2012-13. It's a problem. Who's going to do anything about it? We'd just come on the block then, and it was in very much our coordinate role. So prior to that, when there were these kind of difficult, intangible things going on, one of 2 things happened. Either something happened in the crime and it was really great and they were really good leads and it was easy to do and people fought over doing it. I'm doing it, no, it's my lead, no, it's my lead. And that was great, someone did it. Or no one did it. It's yours, throw it over the fence, not mine, not my area, just that little bit. No, not my area. It reminds me of my kids. It reminds me of my kids when the things say that, so when it's a turn, so they want to do something, okay? So they go out the other day, they go out and fly drones. I want to do it, it's my job to do it, it's my job to do it. So they fight over it, one gets to do it, yeah, and fly the drone, and it crashes, yeah, it crashes. And the youngest son turned around and said, I could have told you the batteries weren't working properly. No one wins. That crash is either a criminal that's got away with it or a victim, another victim, I think. Or take the other example of a couple of weeks back, and thinking about this and trying to put it in home life of kids when there's great big muddy footprints on the carpet, okay? It's not my job to clear them up, Dad. No, not my job to clear them up, Dad. Wife, not my job to clear them up. Well, it's not my job either to clear them up. Who's going to clear them up? Well, no one's going to clear them up. And again, if no one tackles that or makes anything, those muddy footprints are victims of crime, maybe your customers, and/or they're criminals that get away with it. So what we did on pension liberation fraud was we brought together the pensions regulator, HMRC, Financial Crime Authority, City of London Police, and some others around there, but they were the prime people at the moment, to say, look, let's get a collective understanding. Let's share what we know about this. We used some of our modelling software to understand how the fraud worked, and really work through a plan of how we were going to tackle that, using the 4 Ps, actually, and the different agencies. And that was a real model of success in collaborative working. No one was trying to get one over each other. Everybody had a shared understanding and a collective response to what we were doing. And it made a real difference to the way that pension liberation fraud was done. I'm told, just seeing a threat assessment from the TPR, that it was virtually eliminated. So that's good. That's part of the response. And talking about that, I'll come back actually in a minute to things that you didn't want to hear too much. So on a very secret document from the, it's not that secret actually, but a threat is being worked out at the moment. The pension regulator at the moment is looking at where the threats are now at the moment. And a couple of things that are really relevant to me and what I'm talking about are, there's several things. They identify a couple of particular sort of products that may be at risk. But it's more about the professional enablers. Really worried about professional enablers and banks. They're worried about banks because of the speed of the money goes through banks and tracking it, and the independent trustees are unable to assist and intervene in the way that they could. So that's probably why it's quite important to work with the banks. So I talked about not bank bashing. The NCA has led the creation of something called the JMLIT, 5-letter acronym, hey? We can outdo you on that. JMLIT, Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force. It started off with 10 banks, 4 law enforcement agencies, and the FCA working together, using a gateway we have. So we have a permissive gateway in the NCA. It's called Section 7 Crime and Courts Act, which means that effectively anyone can give us anything to do with our functions. We're pretty broad. We can give anything to anybody in relation to their functions. I hope there's no lawyers in the room because I've simplified it slightly, but it effectively has that. We can, it's permissive in that particular way. It's not compulsive. We can't force people to do things. There are certain powers we have that we can force people to do, but it's about a permissive one. So using this, what we've done is sit down with the banks and put real information on the table, not just talk about what we're going to do, we have done it. I remember the first one we did. It wasn't about Nigel Kirby's bank account at the particular time. This was more threats. It was about what we knew about virtual currency threats and what banks knew. We've got threat assessments on that. We share them with government. We share them with law enforcement. We gave those banking people working with those experts that threat assessment exactly as it went to government departments, police, GCHQ, wherever it might have gone. They got it, unredacted. Some people thought I was mad. Some of my colleagues, God, Kirby, what have you done that for? The risk. Well, fortunately, I'm still here. I still have a job. And it was the olive branch that's taken us forward, because now that's just happening routine, and it's not just the threat assessments, it's real information about real people doing real crime now, bank accounts, names, numbers, etc. Of course, again, and just being very clear, and if there's any media here or things going on that anyone wants to talk to me about the context of it, I'm happy to do that afterwards. There are checks and balances. You can't. It's not. It's not fishing expeditions. We are proving suspicion around this. We're ensuring things are necessary and proportionate when we do it. So a caveat there. And we have our lawyers involved in that. So it's not a maverick way of doing things at all. It's making a huge difference. How is it making a difference? Well, by sharing information in this way, over the last 18 months since we've set this up, we've identified about 2,000 accounts in financial services that we weren't aware of, that are really interesting lines of inquiry. Of that, we've applied for around about 70 production orders. So these are going to the court to say, we're suspicious about this. Judge, can you please order the bank to provide this information, which we can use in evidence. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. What a saving of time, focusing on that, rather than having to go and get production orders when you're not quite sure what's there or whether it's criminal or not. Saving of bank time, saving of court time, saving of officer time that can then be spent actually working on tracking down and getting evidence against the criminals. So really efficient side of things there. Banks themselves are taking collective responsibility. Yes, we are pursuing some people. We have made over 50 arrests. We, not just the NCA, most of them are partner colleagues. We facilitate this for others. So that's over 50 arrests. They're not purely down to that information. My work, my life is about a jigsaw, or that of my colleagues is about filling in those bits of the jigsaw that leads to the arrests and hopefully the convictions of bad people. That's what we do, but they've filled in part of that jigsaw. So by no means do I go away saying, over 50 arrests are all down to Jim, they wouldn't have happened otherwise, but it's contributed. And like all things in life, some have contributed considerably more and been significant, others might be less so. The banks have started as well, I say collective responsibility, their own investigations. They've chosen to de-risk and leave and close down some accounts where it's not possible for us to be taking forward any other form. That's their commercial decision. I think, personally, as long as that's targeted and thought through, that's a good thing. It means that criminals don't have access and criminal money doesn't have access to the UK financial system in the way that it might now. And alerts. I talked about the virtual currency. It's not just about the operational side, it's about what we call alerts, putting together the information we know about a particular threat. Human trafficking, for example, the red flag indicators of human trafficking that there are from a banking perspective and our own perspective with our analysts, really gifted, clever people together and sharing that. But we don't just share with the 10 banks, now 12, that are signed up to our use. We share with the whole industry, British Banking Association. We're not precious about this. This is about protecting our society and our citizens. So those alerts that we have produced together, they are there for the whole of banking use. Some it might not be relevant to. That's fine. Others it will. The feedback is that that is the best source of information that people have got to be able to help manage their own risks and put in prevent strategies. So that's, I suggest, a real step forward in partnership working. And just to give a sense also, there was a story around this one, wasn't there? So the alerts about is it have any real impact? I'm trying to kind of get used to, I don't do Facebook or Twitter or these kind of things or particular hits, but I was told by one bank that one of the alerts we did within the first week had 21,000 hits. So in that bank, 21,000 people have read that. They might not read it all, they've read some of it, which is surely some quite good awareness. Or as my younger son actually said to me, he said, no, Dad, someone read it 21,000 times. Maybe they did. I suspect there's something in the middle there. And there's also another bit to it when you get to it about it's quite catchy. It had like a red tabloid instead of, here is an assessment of serious and organised crime from the NCA's perspective. It doesn't really kind of bite, does it, in terms of reading it. 10 things you need to know about cuckoo smurfing. People might open it up and read it. So for me, lesson, catchy titles and get some professional comms people in to work on these things. More people read them, get more hits. So we're proud of what we've done in the GymNet. I'm proud of working with the banks. And it's not just them, it's a wider industry. And it's important that we work with the private and public sector. I mentioned about professional enablers and our tackling professional enablers here. So I want to involve you in helping me with an ethical question. So, I'm in charge of teams that go out and looking at serious and organised crime. We have information, good information, about Nigel Kirby, well-known criminal. He's a criminal. It's horrible. He's been in prison, out of prison, etc. He drives around in his car. We've got his car. He uses his car for criminal purposes. No one else is ever in it other than criminals. And he's going to be meeting somebody in the next 2 days to take possession of 2 kilos of cocaine, 20 kilos of cocaine, doesn't really matter, a lot of cocaine and a gun. Is it right for me, or not me, I'm too old to get underneath cars and put these things on, is it right for us to put an electronic tracking device on that car to find out where Nigel Kirby goes? Is it ethical, right? Does anyone agree? Should I do that or shouldn't I do it? Hands up if I should do it. Yeah, I think it's about right. Be interested to think the hands up that think I shouldn't. I'll go one further. Do you think it's right, ethical, and the right thing? Would you expect me and law enforcement, you're the public, we police with consent, to put an eavesdropping device in that car so that we can hear what Nigel Kirby does and his plans to get the cocaine and gun because it won't be there, and when we know what those plans are, we can intervene and we can seize that cocaine and we can seize that gun? Would that be okay to do? Put your hands up if you think it's okay to do. Sorry? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was going to get to that. It's not necessary, proportionate collateral intrusion. I have to, in these, just important point from that, it's the right oversight. And the oversight for those kind of things are different levels. There's senior officers in the agency, or for something eavesdropping like that, the Office of Surveillance Commissioners. And rest assured, the applications are very, very thorough, very detailed, and are separately appropriately authorised and inspected from that. But I just want to get a view from here, with that caveat, that properly authorised, was that right? So most people, I think, kind of thought that was okay. And you'd expect us to do it, wouldn't you? Because actually, if we don't do that, we're going to go off and have a gun, make a few thousand quid out of the cocaine deal, 10,000 quid out of the cocaine deal. Let me put another scenario to you. Nigel Kirby, respected investment banker, major UK bank. He's got a car, Aston Martin. I'd love to have an Aston Martin. So, Aston Martin. I drive it around. My wife drives it around. My daughter drives it around. Right? So there's other people in that car. We get information, similar source, that Nigel Kirby actually is going to meet up with an associate and exchange market-sensitive information. To be clear, insider trading. I'm going to pass that information over so someone is going to make hundreds of thousands, if not millions, out of that. Do you think, who here thinks we should put a tracker on Nigel Kirby's Aston Martin to see where he goes to meet up? A few, but less. Let's be really controversial. Who thinks, provided it's necessary, proportionate, and legally done, that we should put an eavesdropping device in that vehicle so that we can hear what Nigel Kirby does, the market-sensitive information, and we can intervene and make sure it doesn't happen and that the stock market's not skewed? I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because when I did a similar thing 2 years ago in a fraud conference, people were horrified that we would do that, and it's a different audience. So I am actually encouraged by that because, ladies and gentlemen, when it's properly authorised, when it's necessary, when it's proportionate, when we consider the collateral intrusion, that is what the National Crime Agency is doing with professional enablers. And it's too early for me because I was asked to tell some stories of things that we've done, and I'll look at the time and move on there. It's too early for me to say about some of the stories we've done there because people have been arrested, and we've got some next week in November as well. I hope to be able to, or if we ever get invited back here again, or other things like that, to be able to tell actually what we've done and get to conviction. So let me get to some of those stories. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. I was asked last night by Lesley about could I tell some stories? Just go on, you've national crime, you can tell me. No. She gave me a glass of red wine. I said, no. Second glass of red wine. I said, no, not really. We didn't get any further because I would have cracked on the third glass of red wine, okay? So, let me do it now. Not that I've had any wine. Let me take the case of Operation 70. 5 people, 70 years in prison. For smuggling in last year into Cuxton Marina, 22 assault rifles, 9 machine pistols, 1,500 rounds of ammunition. That's what we do. That's on our website. Okay? It's not secret, and you can see it at www.nationalcrimeagency.gov.uk. Let me take the case you'll have seen in the newspaper of Richard Huckle, paedophile. Malaysia, he operated in, purporting to be an English teacher, abusing young children. Young children, younger, on fingers of my hand, yes, 5, 6, 7, even a baby. He came back to the UK, we got him in the UK, 20,000 indecent images on his computer, 1,000 of him raping and abusing kids. He's in prison. I hope he's in prison for a long time. That's what we do in the National Crime Agency with partners. You can see it online, on the web. Let me talk about my own work, money laundering, I've talked before. Let me talk about Herbie Austin, iconic untouchable. for many of the people, responsible for the robbery or the theft of 12 million out of a German bank about 2000. Serving 5 years in prison for that. My financial investigators, of whom I'm deeply proud, have a £4.7 million confiscation order against him to pay back that money. And if he doesn't pay back £4.7 million, he can spend another 6 years in prison and still owe the £4.7 million plus 8% interest. Can you get 8% interest anywhere? If any of you can I have a word afterwards? I'd like to invest with you. Okay, so that, and we talked about professional enablers. I'll finish on professional enablers. Operation Midlands, drugs-based, money laundering, accountant, 16 people put in prison altogether for drugs and money laundering. £35 million went through UK financial systems. It was facilitated by an accountant who is now in prison for 8 years. That is your professional enabler. I can talk about exactly the type of person that was manipulating and using his knowledge of the financial systems to enable money laundering. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked about the role of the National Crime Agency. I've talked about how serious and organised crime are a real, present and chronic threat. What we do. Some of the vulnerabilities. Absolutely key, though, if you take away from this, is about I need to work in partnership around this. I've talked about economic crime a bit, and I've given you some other examples of things that the agency do. As I said to start with, I still have been worrying very much about these figures and being the warm-up act for Lesley. We've only got 10 minutes and he's on, so that's great. And I thought, should I try and tell a joke or be funny? I thought, no, that's not me. I don't do that. Lesley entertains the public. I don't entertain the public. Actually, there's something else about Lesley Henry he does that you'll be very aware of. Not. I haven't got his permission to say this, but I should have probably asked him when I was here. He protects the public. His charitable work, our most vulnerable people in our country and other countries are benefiting from the charitable work that Lesley takes forward. So Lesley protects the public. The NCA is here to work with you and protect the public. I'd like to finish just with a very short 2-minute video about the NCA and what we do, please.
Organised crime is everywhere.
It can affect families, it can affect communities.
Normal people from all walks of life.
And the impact that it has can be devastating. And every day is never the same.
On a typical day, the NCA deal with corruption, drugs,
Firearms,
child sexual exploitation,
cybercrime, fraud. The NCA is a team altogether to combat those offences.
our aim is to protect the public.
Protect the public. Protect the public. Protect the public.
we work to prevent harm before it happens.
Building partnerships with the private sector and within the law enforcement.
Arresting the top cyber criminals that have an impact on the UK, criminals using malicious software to steal data.
Prevent online sexual exploitation of children.
A law enforcement agency that's dealing with huge amounts of intelligence and operations every single day.
The NCA has a number of sensitive niche capabilities.
And what are they?
I can't tell you. Organised crime, Northern Wales, Holland, Spain, Belgium, South America, South Africa, Dubai, the list of countries where we are able to operate in tennis. It's a team job to see those results or when you've protected an individual. It makes me massively proud.
Being an NCA officer means everything to me.
It's a real privilege.
We are making a difference to people.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.